I personally have iPad Pro 2020, and I think still this is much better deal for most people. So what's really new about iPad Air anyway? So first of all, display. So this display is 10.9 inch display and 500 nit brightness. And you might be thinking, oh, what's the refresh rate? So this is actually 60 Hertz refresh rate. And you might be thinking, oh, it's not 120? Yeah, so this is 60 Hertz. But I think depending on what you do, it may be a problem or maybe not a problem at all. So let me explain. 120 Hertz, what does it mean? So it means every second this screen refreshes 120 times. And this one's 60 Hertz, it refreshes 60 times. So the higher the better, right? Higher the smoother. If you are just a casual user, and then if you just occasionally watch movie, maybe take a memo or something like that, I think 60 Hertz is totally fine. But if you are like digital artist, right? Like if you draw something on the iPad, maybe you should be buying 120 Hertz iPad Pro, because when I actually write something on iPad Air, I could kind of see the delay, little latency. So you might be kind of annoyed by that. So if you're serious about your art, I think maybe iPad Pro would be better. So speaking of bezel, it's not really changed at all. Like it's basically still like a big, thick, bezel. But for iPad, I still need to like hold it, right? So, but it's actually kind of nice to have a margin because my fingerprint doesn't go all over because I have a margin on the bezel. So I take that. The new feature is Touch IDs. Yes, so Touch ID came back. Now it actually sits on the power button, so you can actually unlock and use it. But honestly, I think I prefer Face ID. It's actually kind of weird, isn't it? Because like to make this new system, Apple has to invest their people. I mean, it costs money, right? To develop this. But they already have Face ID. Because this iPad has bezel, they could have just put, little tiny Face ID over here, but they didn't do it for whatever reason. So in my opinion, I think, they spent a lot of money to develop this, right? And although this sells pretty well, but I think this is gonna come to other devices like iPhones or maybe some other devices too. So let's see what's gonna happen. Speaker. So this one has 4 speakers right here and from the both sides. So it's actually pretty pleasing actually. It's actually sound quality is pretty similar to iPad Pro 2020. So I think it's a really great media consumption tools for you. For the chipset, this has A14 Bionic chip. It's really fast. So it's actually faster than iPad Pro in Geekbench single core score. So crazy. For RAM, it has 4 GB of RAM. So Pro has 6 GB. So that's a difference. But to be honest, if you're a casual user, 4 GB is totally fine. For the camera has only one camera. And I think there's no problem to that. Unlike iPad Pro, there's no ultra wide and flash as well. But who's gonna use this camera anyway? So most likely you're gonna use it for like a document scanning. So this is good enough. It's actually the same camera as iPad Pro, so it's good quality. In terms of battery, so battery, I don't know, I need to test it. But because it doesn't have 120 Hertz, I would assume this battery life would be crazy good. Also, A14 Bionic chipset helps battery life. So let's see what's gonna happen. But I would assume it's gonna be really good. So you might be thinking, oh, should I get iPad Air or maybe iPad? So I would suggest that if you have enough budget, just go for this because there's many reasons. The first of all, you can use the newer Apple Pencil, but also it has a smart connector. So what that means is you can actually use the Magic Keyboard, and that's actually really great keyboard. So you can use the iPad as computer as well. And also has USB-C, which is much better. So I think it's a really great value if you have a budget. But what about iPad Air versus iPad Pro? And in my opinion, I think most people will be happy with iPad Air. If you're really into 120 Hz, lighter, and maybe bigger size, I think maybe iPad Pro would be good for you. But for most people, I think iPad Air would be great. Honestly, I think even 2018 iPad Pro will be actually good competitor too. And if you're thinking about iPad Pro and iPad Air, maybe consider getting 2018 iPad Pro because there's not much difference between 2018 and 2020. And there's a lighter, ultra-wide camera, and the graphic performance is just a little bit better, but the rest of it is basically the same. And maybe you might be able to find 2018 iPad Pro at the discount price right now. So that might be a good option as well. Is there any downside? And I think there's one thing that I seriously hate about this iPad. So it's more like Apple. Storage starts from 64 gigabyte and there's no 128 and only 256 gigabyte. So that's kind of shame. So for most people, 64 is too small. 256 is too big, and 128 would be like a sweet spot for most people. I think that's not an option intentionally by Apple, I think. And Apple tried to push you to pay more for unnecessary 256 gigabyte. So I think that's the Apple's strategy. But that's kind of one thing that I really hate about this iPad Air. So I think that's it. And do you have any question? Are you excited about this? Did you buy it? And let me know if you have any comment. And I will see you in the next video.